These newspaper clippings from late 1945 show a repeating, chilling phrase in their family notices: died while POW, Sandakan. This plaque maps out the reason for those notices. In early 1945, Japanese commanders ordered the relocation of 2,400 Allied prisoners of war, forcing them to march 260 kilometers through dense, malaria-infested jungle from Sandakan to the village of Renau. Among them was sapper Eric James Gardner. A 39-year-old wood machinist from Perth, Eric survived the initial conditions of the Sandakan camp, only to perish at the final destination, Renau, on July 9, 1945. Eric's death is the endpoint of a specific Australian lineage. Tracing his ancestry reveals that his endurance in the jungles of Borneo was the final chapter in a family history defined by a long, unbroken pattern of survival. We can anchor Eric's story in modern records using this digital family tree, where he is logged clearly among the recent generations of the Gardner family in Western Australia. Cross-referencing digital nodes with handwritten records pulls the timeline backward, from Eric to his mother. Following these ink lines through the 19th century, we trace the generations of women, from Thena to Sarah Eliza Stanley, and back to Sarah Ann Ryan. Reaching the late 1700s connects Eric's lineage to the arrival of the First and Second Fleets. His great-great-grandparents were John Ryan and Sarah Woolley, two of the earliest convicts transported to the new colony. Crossing into the 18th century changes the nature of the research. The family tree is no longer a collection of names and dates. It becomes a ledger of people struggling against the weight of the British penal system. This document identifies Eric's ancestor, John Ryan. In 1784, the 19-year-old London silk weaver was convicted of stealing a coat. Surviving a ship mutiny, he arrived in Sydney in 1788, only to be sentenced to 300 lashes for the alleged theft of food. By March 1790, John was sent to Norfolk Island, a remote, desperate agricultural outpost meant to grow food for the starving mainland settlement. John Ryan survived the ocean transports, the 300 lashes, and the forced labor of a remote island. By the time he was granted land on Norfolk Island, he had successfully navigated the most extreme conditions the penal system could inflict. 5 years after John's conviction, Sarah Woolley was sentenced to 7 years transportation for stealing a piece of printed cotton from a London draper. This primary account describes the arrival of Sarah's ship, the Neptune, in June 1790. The voyage was so brutal that hundreds of convicts were landed in a state of scurvy and dysentery, with many dying as they were rowed ashore. Sarah survived the Neptune, only to be immediately transferred from Sydney to the isolation of the Norfolk Island outpost. On this historical map, we see the unlikely convergence of these two survivors. John and Sarah married on the island in 1791, and by December, they were established on a 10-acre farm, successfully clearing land and selling grain. Against high odds of mortality, these two convicts built a life and a farm, physically planting the seed of the Gardner bloodline in a hostile environment. 150 years apart, the environments that tested this family mirrored each other. The isolation of Norfolk Island in the 1790s finds a direct geographical parallel in the jungles of Borneo in the 1940s. John and Sarah endured forced transport, starvation, and captivity at the hands of the British Empire. In 1945, their descendant, Eric, faced those same specters under the Japanese Empire during the march to Renau. While John and Sarah survived their crucible to establish the family line, Eric was lost to his, giving his life in service to the nation his ancestors helped build. Looking across these centuries, the family tree reveals itself as a record of human endurance carried forward through time. Today, Eric is honored here at Kings Park. His sacrifice anchors this multi-generational story of survival into the modern fabric of Australia's national memory.